Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, ready to take a deep dive look at more ridiculous content from the world of video games. The information superhighway is currently buzzing about the arrival of the high quality latest DLC that has been released for Streets of Rage 4. A video game that was already one of the most highly anticipated and critically acclaimed brawlers in many years. With all of this going on, as usual, it got me in the mood to talk Streets of Rage, and take some time to take a look at further Streets of Rage media that's out there. In the past, we have already looked at fan-made projects such as the Streets of Rage remake, Streets of Rage Z, and even the insane horror-themed title known as Streets of Rage Zombies. Today we are going to take a trip down yet another strange rabbit hole as we turn our attention to yet another unbelievable fan-made oddity. This is perhaps the most bizarre Streets of Rage game we have looked at on this channel as of yet. So without further ado, this ladies and gentlemen is the insane story of Streets of Rage Russia. Yeah! Plenty of times in the past we have talked about OpenBor of Rage, a royalty-free sprite-based engine that allows users to create whatever 2D game they wish. While there are many games out there that were made from the ground up using OpenBor, many are simply fan projects that often supplant graphics and characters from existing games. These can often pay homage to users' favourite titles from the past, with many Streets of Rage fan projects emerging through the use of this program. Now, being fan-made passion projects, information on some of these titles online can often be very confusing, particularly when one popular project has been updated or modded time and time again by different users. But from at least what I can tell on the internet, Streets of Rage Russia was a fan project created in the early 2010s by a person with the username AntiGuff. Since then, the original creator has built on the game further, releasing multiple versions, with other users remaking the game and attempting to build and improve upon the title further, with there being Streets of Rage Russia remakes out there. But at the crux of it all, one thing all these games have in common is the unique Russian theme, giving the titles a different flavour from other Streets of Rage variants created using the OpenBor format. Now, calling these OpenBor games gritty would be an understatement, as highlighted by YouTube content creator Boggy the Worm. The creator has full playthroughs of the game up on his channel, where he attaches warnings to his video descriptions, informing the viewer that these playthroughs contain nudity, gore, and features that many would deem politically incorrect. In fact, to remain advertiser friendly, I sadly cannot physically show you everything this game has to offer, as some of it, at points, is simply too lewd for my reasonably family friendly content. Like the Streets of Rage Zombies game we looked at before this, Streets of Rage Russia features the use of blood being spilled in some of the versions when attacks connect, instantly giving the title a more mature theme than your official Sega licensed Streets of Rage titles. Players can choose from a wide range of familiar Streets of Rage characters and fan-made modified ones to play as. The player goes on an adventure to rid Russia of a man known as Vito Janelli, who goes by the nickname of Crest. In these games, you play as a Russian or one of the cast members of Streets of Rage visiting Russia for the first time. The game features a controversial theme that features the characters on a quest to defend Russia. In fact, in these video games, the representation of the country is depicted as extremely bleak and almost post-apocalyptic. Reportedly, the game features your character defending Mother Russia against all sorts of so-called threats that range from Ukrainian nationalists, the homeless, drunks, and much more controversial opposition. In fact, certain versions of the game allow players to control a bizarre-looking character known as Vatnik. To explain this further, Vatnik is a political slur that is often used in Russia and other post-Soviet states. Vatnik was on an internet meme that was introduced by Anton Chadsky in 2011, which denotes a steadfast, jingoistic follower of propaganda from the Russian government. The Vatnik character from the memes is made from the material of a padded cotton wool jacket and bears a black eye, which is used to disparage someone as a blindly patriotic and unintelligent jingoist who pushes the conventional views presented in Russian government media as well as those of Russian web brigades. To put it simply, the Vatnik is a representative of a certain archetypical Russian who supports the regime out of fear, hatred of others, or most often a combination of both. Here, for example, is an activist in Ukraine using the image of Vatnik in the Boycott Russian Films campaign. This means that there are various opponents in this game who the Vatnik must take down, such as Ukrainian nationalists as mentioned above, but going deeper down these game's dark rabbit holes, as Vatniks you must defend Russia against homosexuals, sexual deviants from the leather community, and people belonging to certain religious and ethnic groups. The games are politically loaded whether it be parody or not. The game's dystopian, grimy feel exudes perhaps the most foreboding feeling Streets of Rage titles I've ever experienced as of yet. The opening stage of an earlier version of the game sees streets covered in graffiti and litter as you fight your way through a wasteland, taking out gopniks and other opponents. In terms of a gopnik, this is another Russian term to describe a subculture in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus and in other former Soviet republics, describing people from working class backgrounds that usually live in Russian suburban areas and come from a family of poor education and income. I guess making them the former Soviet versions of what we refer to in my country as chavs. The baseball cap and tracksuit wearing gopniks in the game often wield knives. In fact, your character clashes with police in the opening stage too. Players progress into seedy rundown bars, taking on drunks and more gopniks and other stereotypes. As mentioned, all the stages throughout the game are depicted as rundown slums that have just been left to rot away. Moving through the game, Soviet architecture can be witnessed in the backgrounds. For example, these uniform ugly grey buildings that represent the horrible brutalist style of architecture that has become so synonymous with the USSR, as well as factories spewing out smoke and pollution into the already grim air. It's not long either before players are doing battle with other stereotypical enemies such as these women here, or even half-dressed prozzies who I have to censor out. Progressing, things get more and more war-torn, with many of the buildings in the background being depicted as completely derelict, with half the structures missing, suggesting militarised attacks. Even the beaches in this game are completely littered and spoiled with rubbish and debris, displaying that even natural beauty has been destroyed in the world of Streets of Rage Russia. The same dystopian feel of the beach is also carried over to the game's parks, with the areas and benches even being covered in graffiti with empty alcohol bottles and humans sick on them. The disturbing looking stage even has billboards placed around depicting crude illustrations of certain body parts and political posters displaying who appears to be President Putin, leaving no doubt in players' mind which era in history that this game is supposed to be taking place in. These themes continue as players progress, taking on both police and military personnel along the way. The game even has a classic beat-em-up lift section where gamers descend into the darkness, accompanied by a scrolling graffiti-covered wall with even more posters of Russia's leader showing up in the background. No one can say these games aren't a tad different. Players then play through a number of further stages that carry on the theme of the game before finally reaching Crest himself, who is clearly a modified Mr. X sprite. He is accompanied by a huge amount of other enemies who must also be taken out in order to finish this version of the game. Now, as you can see, while there was clearly a lot of political nods in this version of the game, later Streets of Russia mods would really bring the game's themes up a notch, which include way more stages, characters and extra gameplay modes, with one of the most controversial stages being the nightclub from Streets of Rage 3, where gamers must take out a number of leather-wearing foes. These games are insane. There is even one stage in one of these mods where every opponent on the level is wearing what seems to be SS uniforms, with a boss fight taking place against, well, you know who it is, I don't need to say his name for you. In fact, there is a version of the game I am showing now that after defeating the biggest heel of World War II, players have the opportunity to fight against everyone's favourite President Biff Tannen tribute act, Donald Trump himself. These games are crazy. All in all though, there is no denying that these games are full of controversy with political references doused all over the place. Even if the original version of Streets of Rage Russia was not quite as insane as what was to come in the future. Speaking of Streets of Rage Russia, I think that it is highly likely that this was the game that would inspire an officially licensed 2016 beat-em-up known as Mother Russia Bleeds. A game that is set in an alternative 1980s Soviet Union ruled by the Russian Mafia. A game with a lot of stylistic similarities to Streets of Rage Russia that is said to be heavily inspired by Streets of Rage, Double Dragon and Renegade. Let me know in the comments down below if you would be interested in me producing a deep dive on this one in the future. I would be curious to hear your thoughts. As for Streets of Rage Russia though, the game and its updates and mods are chocked to the brim full of Russia references, many of which I am bound to have missed due to not being a Russian native. If you have picked up on some I have failed to include, please feel free to add them to the discussion as there is just so much going on here with this one. Overall, I have to say, out of all of the OpenBor games I've covered on this channel so far, these ones are perhaps some of the most bizarre and certainly controversial of them all. But no one could ever complain that no effort was made to try and make these games different from the original Streets of Rage titles. The dystopian, ominous, foreboding feel of these most definitely makes them stand out from the pack. So, I guess ladies and gentlemen, that was the story of Streets of Rage Russia. If you enjoyed what you saw today, feel free to check out my previous videos on the Streets of Rage fan remake and Streets of Rage Zombies. I have plenty of content on here on beat 'em up history for you to go back and enjoy. If you want to be notified every time I upload new content here, be sure to click that subscriber button and ring that notification bell to ensure that you never miss one of my videos. Speaking of gaming history linked to Russia, over on Patreon I have an exclusive video covering the existence of the Cybeco handheld, which I recorded over in Communist Park in Budapest. So, by supporting the channel for just $5 a month on Patreon, you gain access to my entire vault of exclusive Patreon uploads. Speaking of Patreon backers, I would like to give thank yous to the following loyal supporters of my work. So special shout outs go out to Sebastian Velez, A Murder of Crows, Carl Johnson, Heyo Paulo Lopez, Nostalgia Collector, Ben Harradine, Corey Imar Sr., Capcom vs SNK, BXL Gotham, Ryan Dinched, Evan Border, Philip Manth, Azure Arkai, Keith Ferguson, Jochen Varela, Michael Cullix, Ago, Jordan Durant, Angel Light 85, Ian Boyle, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Kid Anime, Justin Wang, Aaron McNamara, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Michael Hall, Wesley Sanghi, Felicio, Langston Miller, Noob, Brian Barry, Sarah Powell, Vlamik Renee, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, TOG Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Stu Stewart, Dan Van Dammit, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bauer, Chris Fisk, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, Andrew Bazanski, Alex Summers, Gunther Hendricks and everybody else who backs me on the Patreon platform. Thank you so much for your kind generosity. Yeah. Cheerio.